But for more on this, we're joined by David Bier from Washington, D.C. He's the Director of Immigration Policy at the Niskanen Center. That's a libertarian think tank. Mr. Bier, it's very good to have you with us on Al Jazeera. I know that your organization is actually advocating for private sponsorship of refugees. Tell us, how would that work?
Well, it would be pretty similar to other forms of immigration sponsorship. To come to the United States, typically you have to have a family member or an employer sponsor you in order to come over to the United States. And under private refugee sponsorship, you would need a sponsor in the United States who would be willing to take the financial burden off the government and bring you over under their guidance and care. And so they would provide housing and food and help integrate you into U.S. society. And so really, we're building on a premise that's throughout the U.S. immigration system already and just hasn't been applied to the refugee crisis in this way just yet.
Do you think that there is an appetite among the U.S. public for private sponsorship of refugees, especially in the current political climate and the kind of support we've seen for, presidential candidates like Donald Trump, who seem to be very against the idea of admitting them into the country?
Oh, there's been an incredible outpouring of support since we first suggested this idea, along with 9 Syrian, Muslim, and Arab American organizations here in the United States, who signed a letter to the president endorsing the idea of private sponsorship. We have seen a tremendous amount of support and compassion from everyday Americans, Americans who aren't personally impacted by the crisis, who want to help. And we actually have seen many examples already of refugees who have come over to the United States, who have seen the welcoming hospitality of the American public. There was a great example in my home state of New Jersey of a pastor who took in a Syrian refugee into their own home and really helped them provide housing and employment. And so it's already happening on a smaller scale. We just hope that the U.S. government will consider this idea and expand it to be able to welcome many more refugees than the U.S. government is currently accepting.
I know that the U.S. State Department did have a private sector initiative. I think that was from 1987 to 1995. Did that not work? What happened to it?
Well, it was used twice, and it was used during crises. So there's a precedent for creating private sponsorship in this context. It was used for Soviet Jews who were fleeing communism as the Berlin Wall came down and Soviet communism collapsed. The State Department created an opportunity for Jewish organizations in the United States to sponsor refugees and bring them over. It was also used for Cubans as they were fleeing communism during the 80s, and it was really reaching a crisis situation in the Caribbean. And the Reagan administration, a Republican administration, actually created a private sponsorship avenue for refugees, and that's really the precedent that we're relying upon.
David Bier, Director of Immigration Policy at Niskanen Center, joining us from Washington, D.C. Thank you very much for your time.